everyone. Welcome to my first ICMAI CAT Tax class. In today's video, we are going to learn the basic of GST. This class is especially useful for students preparing for the ICMAI CAT examination. Now, I don't want you to simply memorize everything from the textbook. My approach in this video is going to be very simple. First, we'll understand the concept. Then we'll see how to remember it for the exam. And finally, we'll practice some MCQs. So our goal for today's class is very simple. Understand, remember, then apply. So without wasting any time, let's start with GST. Before we start, I want to tell you something. If you're completely new to the GST, don't worry. You don't need to know everything before watching this video. I'm going to explain the concept from the very beginning, and whenever we reach an important point for ICMAI CAT, I'll highlight it for you. So keep your notebook ready, and whenever I say CAT alert, make sure you pay extra attention, because that could be an important examination point. Okay, let's begin. So first of all, what is GST? GST stands for Goods and Service Tax. In simple words, GST is an indirect tax charged on the supply of goods, services, or both. Now, I want you to remember one very important word here. The word is supply. Whenever you think about GST, immediately connect GST with the word supply. Why? Because under GST, supply is the taxable event. We'll study supply in more details later in this video. Now, there is an important exemption. GST does not apply to the supply of alcoholic liquor for human consumption. So, for your exam, remember, GST is supply of goods, services, or both. And alcoholic liquor for human consumption is outside the GST framework. This is an important point. So, make sure you remember it. Now, the next question is, why do we call GST an indirect tax? Let's understand this with a simple example. Suppose you go to a shop and buy a product. The shopkeeper tells you the product and collects GST from you. The shopkeeper then deposits that tax with the government. So, the shopkeeper is a person collecting and paying the tax to the government. But who ultimately bears the economic burden? You, the consumer. So the person who deposits the tax and the person who finally bears the burden can be different. That's why GST is called an indirect tax. Now let's compare this with direct tax. In a direct tax, the burden generally stays with the person on whom the tax is imposed. For example, income tax is a direct tax. So here's our memory trick. Direct taxes, burden stays with the taxpayer. Indirect taxes, burden can be shifted. And the easiest examples are income taxes, direct tax. GST is indirect tax. Remember this difference because MCQ can easily ask you to identify whenever a particular tax is direct or indirect. Now let's look at some important features of indirect tax. The first feature is government revenue. Indirect taxes are an important source of revenue for the government. The second is shifting of burden. As we discussed, the tax can be collected by the seller, but the burden can ultimately be passed on to the buyer. The third feature is wider tax base. Because indirect tax are connected with the consumption of goods and services, they can cover a large number of people. The fourth is inflationary effect. Tax can increase the cost paid for goods and services. It means if the tax is imposed on goods or services, the final cost paid by the consumer may increase. Therefore, indirect taxes can have an inflationary effect. And finally, indirect tax can also be used for social welfare. For example, higher taxation on harmful goods can discourage discourage their consumption. Now for your ICMAI CAT exam, don't just memorize the name of these features. Try to understand what each feature actually means. Because in an MCQ, the examiner may give you a statement and ask you to identify the correct feature. Now let's understand the different type of GST. This is one of the most important areas to remember. First we have CGST. CGST stands for Central Goods and Service Tax. Then we have SGST. SGST stands for State Goods and Service Tax. Now when there is an intra-state supply, meaning the supply takes place within the same state, we generally have CGST and plus SGST. One portion goes to the central government and other portion goes to the state government. Now what about union territory? In the case of union territory, we have CGST plus UTGST, which is UTGST means Union Territory Goods and Service Tax. Now if the supply is between two different states, there is an interstate supply. Then we have IGST. IGST stands for Integrated Goods and Service Tax. And imports are treated as interstate supply and are subject to IGST along with applicable custom duties. So here's a very simple memory trick. Same state CGST plus SGST, Union Territory CGST plus UTGST, different state IGST. Remember this clearly because GST structure questions are very common in MCQs. Now let's talk about the GST Council. The GST Council is a constitutional body that recommends important matters relating to GST. Now the important points for your exam is who is the chairperson of GST Council? The answer is the Union Finance Minister. This is a very common direct MCQ. The member include the Union Finance Minister of State in charge of Revenue or Finance and the Finance of Taxation Minister of each state or another minister nominated by the state government. So if you get an MCQ asking who is the chairperson of the GST Council, your answer is Union Finance Minister. Don't confuse this with the Prime Minister or RBI Governor. Catch alert. Chairperson is equal to Union Finance Minister. Now, what does the GST Council actually do? The Council makes a recommendation on several important GST matters. For example, it recommends matters relating to the taxes, cesses and duties that should be subsumed under GST. It also recommends, subsumed means replaced by the way. So it can recommend thresholds, turnover limits. It deals with special provision for certain states. It also deals with the apportionment of IGST. It can recommend matters relating to dispute resolution, and it also deals with the GST legislation, rules and notification. So when you think about the GST Council, think GST Council is equal to recommendation about the design and working of GST. That's the easiest way to remember its role. Now let's understand why GST was introduced and what its benefits are. Let's divide the benefit into three categories. First, benefit to business and industry. GST make compliance easier through online services. It promotes uniformity in tax rates and structures. It helps remove the cascading effect of taxes, and it can improve competitiveness. Second, benefit to the government. GST simplifies tax administration. It helps improve control over tax leakage, and it can improve revenue efficiency. Third, benefits to the consumer. GST provide a more transparent tax structure and it may provide relief in the overall tax burden. So the basic idea is GST creates a broader and more unified tax framework, helping India move towards a common national market. Now let's move to the constitutional aspect. The Constitution of India is the supreme law of India. So the government simply make any tax. Sorry, this is a question. So can the government simply make any law, any tax law it wants? Actually, no. A tax law must be in conformity with the Constitution. Means it should follow the laws of the Constitution. So remember this simple relationship. Constitution is equal to supreme law and the tax law must follow the Constitution. This is the concept based question. So don't just memorize the sentence. Understand the basic idea. The Constitution is supreme and taxation laws must have constitutional validity. Now we are coming to one of the most important concepts in GST, and that is supply. Remember what we said at the beginning. GST is connected with supply. In fact, supply is the taxable event under GST. GST is levied when there is a taxable supply of goods, services or both. Now supply can include different forms of transaction. For example, sale, transfer, barter, exchange, license, rental, lease and deposit. So whenever you see a question about GST, one of the first questions you should ask yourself is there a supply? Only after identifying the supply should you move forward and think about the GST concept. So remember, before asking how much GST, ask is there a supply? Now let's understand the basic condition. For the basic rule we are studying here, remember three important ideas. The first is consideration. Ask yourself, is there something given in return? The second is person. The transaction must be made by a person. And the third is business. The transaction should be in the course or furtherance of business, subject to the detailed provision and exemption under GST law. And here's a memory trick. CPB. C for consideration, P for person and B for business. So CPB is consideration, P for person and B for business. This can help you remember the basic framework. But one important thing, in the actual GST law, there are detailed provision and exemptions. So don't assume that every transaction must always satisfy only these 3 points. For a CAT exam, always read the exact wording of the question carefully. Sometimes changing just one word can completely change the answer. Now let's discuss time of supply. In simple words, time of supply helps us determine whether the GST liability arises. For goods, according to the basic rule in our notes given in the video, we look at the earlier of the relevant dates. We compare the date of issue of invoice or date of which the invoice should have been issued and the date of receipt of payment. Let's take an example. Suppose the invoice is issued on 10th July and a payment is received on 15th July. Which date is earlier? 10th July. Therefore, the time of supply is 10th July. So here's your memory trick. Goods. Compare invoice and payment. Pick the earlier date. Whenever you get a numerical or date based MCQ, don't panic. Simply write down the dates and compare them carefully. Now let's look at services. Here we have an additional condition. If the invoice is issued within the prescribed time, then we compare the invoice date and the payment date. We take the earlier date. But if the invoice is not issued within the prescribed time, then we compare the date of provision of service or date of completion and the date of payment. Again we take the earlier date. So here's a very easy way to remember it. Invoice on time, invoice versus payment, invoice late, service versus payment. The key phrase you need to watch for in an exam is in the prescribed time. If you see that phrase, stop and carefully identify which rule applies. Now let's understand the value of supply. The basic concept is transaction value. That means the price actually paid or payable for the supply. But there are conditions. According to the basic rule in our note given in the video, the supplier and the recipient should not be related, and the price should be the sole consideration for the supply. So here's another memory trick. TNS. T means transaction value, N means not related, S means sole consideration. So remember TNS. If an MCQ changes one of these conditions, don't immediately select transaction value. Read the question carefully and analyze the condition. Okay, now it's time to test your understanding. Here's our first question. GST is primarily levied on option A, income earned by an individual, option B, supply of goods, services or both, option C, ownership of land, option D, saving in a bank. Now pause the video for 5 seconds, think about your answer and then comment it on the video. Okay, let's see the answer. The correct answer is option B, supply of goods, services or both. Why? Because GST is fundamentally linked with the taxable supply of goods, services or both. Income earned by an individual is generally connected with income tax. Ownership of land is not the basic taxable event for GST, and savings in a bank are also not the taxable event for GST. So whenever you see the phrase taxable event under GST, immediately think supply. That's your exam connection. Now let's try another question. Who is the chairman of the GST Council? Option A, Prime Minister of India. Option B, Union Finance Minister. Option C, RBI Governor. Option D, Chief Justice of India. Again pause the video for 5 seconds, then think about your answer and let's check it. The correct answer is option B, Union Finance Minister. The Union Finance Minister is the chairperson of the GST Council. He has a simple memory line: Finance Minister, Finance Decision, GST Council Chairperson. This is a direct recall question. So this is something you should memorize clearly. Now let's quickly revise everything we learned today. GST is an indirect tax connected with supply. Alcoholic liquor for human consumption is outside GST. For intrastate supply, CGST plus SGST. For union territory, CGST plus UTGST. For interstate supply, IGST. The chairperson of the GST Council is Union Finance Minister. Supply is a taxable event under GST. For time of supply of goods, remember the basic order of rule. For services, check whether the invoice was issued within the prescribed time. And for the value of supply, remember transaction value plus not related plus sole consideration. So there are key points you should remember from today's class. Now I have a small challenge for you. Try answering these 5 questions without looking at your note. Number 1. What is the taxable event under GST? Number 2. Who is the chairperson of the GST Council? Number 3. What taxes apply to an intrastate supply? Number 4. What tax applies to an interstate supply? And number 5. What are the 3 basic ideas in our CPB memory trick? Pause the video and write down your answers. And if you want, you can also write your answers in the comments. Let's see how many of you can get all 5 correct. And that's it for today's class. I hope this video helped you understand the basics of GST in a simple way. If you found this class useful, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more ICMAI CAT focused classes. In the next video, we'll continue with more important GST concept and exam oriented MCQ. Thank you so much for watching. All the best for your ICMI CAT preparation. See you in next class. Bye.